In today's video, we are talking about CBT. Specifically, can CBT help with anxiety? Welcome back to our channel where we talk about all things related to anxiety and our mental well-being. And while I believe that CBT, Cognitive Behaviour Therapy, does not go deep enough in unravelling anxiety and getting to the root cause, it can be a very good starting point for many. So in this video, I aim to help you identify some of your repetitive thoughts and beliefs so you can recognise them and avoid the overwhelm and anxiety that often accompany them. Now, do stay around to the end, as I also have included some additional tools and workbooks that you can use alongside CBT. Now, for anyone unsure, cognitive behaviour is a term used to describe how our thoughts influence our feelings and our emotions, which in turn determines our behaviour and our actions. Now, we will explore some basic techniques that you can use to begin responding to and modifying these unhelpful thoughts on your own. We will do this by examining the facts or the evidence to view a situation in a more realistic light. So, as anxiety is an emotion, understanding our thoughts can help to modify our anxious feelings and behaviours. Our thoughts, feelings, behaviours, and even our physiology are all interconnected. And when we are feeling anxious, it can lead to physical sensations such as increased heart rate, rapid and shallow breathing, or overheating. It can lead to sweating, trembling legs, and muscle aches. We may then start to scan our bodies for evidence that we are anxious. Now, this will negatively impact how we think, and we may start to think, I'm going to have a panic attack. This would then influence our behaviour further, and we may wish to get out of the situation that we're in fast, or we may freeze in panic. Now, this all happens so quickly. We have to make a conscious effort to catch ourselves and question what exactly is going on for us. So let's start by really understanding what anxiety is. Now, it is characterised by feelings of fear, worry, nervousness, and overwhelm. Anxiety is an evolutionary response to danger. Your parents experienced it, as did their parents and their parents before them, even if they didn't recognise it as anxiety. It goes back to a time even before human existence. Let me explain. Have you ever seen a lizard? As soon as it sees you and it feels threatened, it freezes. It goes very, very still, part of the fight and flight response. Now, if you stay there and you're calm and you're just watching, the lizard senses that danger has passed and it then runs away really quickly. That is the flight response. It's the anxiety centre of our brain called the amygdala, and this forms part of our reptilian brain. Now, even mammals have it. We have all seen a rabbit or deer freeze in the headlights of an oncoming car. What about a tiger chasing a herd of zebra? When the tiger starts to approach the herd, they sense danger and they scatter due to the flight anxiety response. Now, once one zebra has been caught, the rest of the herd know that the danger has passed, and while their heart rate might be slightly elevated, they all return to grazing. And that's much like us. We have a reptilian brain, overlaying that is the mammalian brain, and then we have the human brain. So this is anxiety in its simplest form. It's there to serve us and keep us safe. In fact, we wouldn't have survived as a species without it. It's in reptiles, it's in mammals, it's in humans. And it's like a smoke alarm, and it gets reacted every time we fear danger. Now, the difference with humans is that our smoke alarm can be activated by our inboxes, a traffic jam, a friend taking too long to reply to a text. It may be our work, our colleagues, our partner, our kids, our elderly parents. The list is actually endless. Now, as humans, we have the ability to dwell on the past and ruminate on something repeatedly. And we also have the ability to think about our future, to surround ourselves with what-if scenarios, something that hasn't even happened yet. We can create fear and panic about something that is in our future and we haven't yet experienced. Additionally, all of us have a negativity bias, which means that we tend to focus on far more of the negatives than we do the positives. We needed to know where the tiger was hiding, back in the times when we were all living in caves. We didn't need to know what it was like to go skipping through a meadow of pretty flowers. So this wasn't a design fault in our brains. This is nature's way of keeping us alive and hypervigilant. We want our anxiety radar to be alerting us if there is actual danger out there. It protects us, and that's a good thing. However, when we're anxious, stuck in traffic, or triggered by a colleague, our negativity bias increases our anxiety as we are constantly looking to justify the way we are feeling. Now, it can quickly become a downward spiral. Negative thoughts can cause anxiety, and when we are anxious, we're more likely to have these negative thoughts and cognitive distortions, and we assume the worst case scenario, or we try and predict the future, we try and fortune tell. So, before we look at solutions, cognitive distortions and the effectiveness of CBT, if you're wondering who I am and how I'm qualified to give you this advice, my name is Jennifer Roblin. I'm an anxiety specialist and therapist, and I'm the founder of Better Your Life. I've helped thousands of people across the UK and beyond understand their anxiety, take back control, and finally feel like themselves again. And I know how you feel, having been there myself. I was living in a constant anxious state for many, many years. Now, we have plenty of free resources over in the description, and if you're not sure where to begin, I suggest you download our free Circle of Control and Influence worksheet. It helps you focus on what you can change, like your breath, your responses, your nervous system, and it gently lets go of what's beyond our control. Now, that shift alone can create a powerful sense of relief. And if you're finding this video useful, please do go ahead and like and subscribe to our channel, as this helps us reach more and more people who may be struggling right now. And don't forget to hit the notification button so you stay up to date with all of our latest videos and free resources. Now, no one enjoys feeling anxious, so many people choose to numb their feelings with behaviours that may offer them temporary relief. But over time, these negative coping strategies may exacerbate anxiety and lead to other problems. Some of the most common ways that we may numb anxiety are through things like substance abuse, including alcohol and drugs, and they can be both legal and illegal drugs, and even using excessive amounts of caffeine or nicotine. We may find that we're overworking. A lot of my clients are workaholics. Excessive work can serve as a distraction from anxiety, but it can also lead to burnout and other health problems. Perhaps you're binge eating or restricting your intake of food. These behaviours can be used to cope with difficult emotions. They're a way that we control how we feel, but they can often lead to eating disorders and other health issues. Now, compulsive behaviours. These include excessive cleaning, gambling, shopping, or even excessive exercise. Social isolation. We may avoid social interactions, and this can be a way to avoid potential anxiety triggers, but it can also lead to loneliness and depression. Self-harm. This includes behaviours that cause physical harm to oneself, like cutting or burning. We may be ruminating. We may be ruminating, continuously dwelling on negative thoughts and feelings that can worsen anxiety. Perhaps we're hyper-focusing on distractions. This could involve spending excessive time on social media, video games, Netflix, and other forms of so-called entertainment. Avoiding anxiety-provoking situations. Now, this can create a cycle of procrastination and avoidance where anxiety actually increases over time when we avoid the things that we don't want to do. Anxiety does not mean you are broken. It means your nervous system needs a reset as you are stuck in a fear response. Anxiety is perfectly natural when we are in fearful situations. However, it can be debilitating when we are feeling anxious on a regular or constant basis. When we are fearful of fear itself, this can lead to prolonged anxiety known as generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, and is also associated with panic attacks. When we can recognise, understand and modify our anxious, distorted thoughts, we are able to better cope with everyday stresses and anxiety. Now, the aim of cognitive behaviour therapy is to gather the evidence and uncover the facts about something that has happened in our past, is happening to us right now, or we are predicting will happen in our future. A trained anxiety therapist knows the right questions to ask so that you can better understand a situation. Questions you can ask yourself could include things like, what is the likelihood that this anxiety-inducing event will actually happen? Or if this event were to happen, what is the worst case scenario? What would I do if that was to happen? How would I handle it? Is there any other explanation to account for what could happen? Questions like, do I know with 100% certainty that all of the facts about this situation are known to me? Now, it may seem strange to focus on the worst case scenario when we're feeling anxious. However, we are often not specific enough about what makes us anxious. We focus on a concept or a feeling rather than a specific goal. Now, once we have identified the worst case, we can talk through the likelihood of the occurrence as well as the best solution to that challenge. There is always more than one explanation to account for what could happen. So this is where we look at different alternatives. And in most cases, we do not know all the facts with 100% certainty and clarity. So this means that the anxiety-inducing event cannot be predicted as we are trying to predict it. Now, having that conversation helps to understand that even if you can't control the situation, you still have influence over it. Again, like I mentioned, the Circle of Control and Influence workbook is over in the description and it's free to download. It is also important that we notice both the positive and negative scenarios in this case. We're not burying how we feel in the sand, but instead we're acknowledging how we feel and we're meeting that feeling with ease. In this way, we have the opportunity to examine how we would cope in a worst case scenario and look at alternative outcomes. Now, the more you can think about alternative positive outcomes, the more you train your brain to understand that you would be able to cope, and the initial thought is no longer as scary as it initially appeared to be. Science has proven, without a shadow of a doubt, that we all have the capacity to change the way our brains work. This is a term known as neuroplasticity. When we adjust our thoughts, we are actually creating new neural pathways in our brain. Now, whilst reframing a new thought will not completely change your life overnight, repeatedly practicing different types of thought patterns can actually rewire our brain, making new, more realistic and helpful pathways of thought more natural. It's just like going to the gym. To build up our physical health, we need to constantly practice and repeat to keep the brain functioning optimally. Now, I often explain it to my clients, it's like this way. Your current way of thinking is like the M25. It's a major motorway around London in the UK. And your thoughts are like all the cars travelling on it. There is constant traffic, day and night. Now, with CBT, we are creating a new path with a new way of thinking. And slowly, we will start to divert the traffic from the M25 to the footpath. So as the path becomes better known, other cars follow, and before we know it, the path is an established new route and the M25 is no longer the preferred path. This is exactly what we do with our thought process. So most people think that practice makes perfect. However, I disagree. Practice makes permanent. After all, if we are practicing the wrong thing, we will never be perfect. It just becomes more of the same. So by consistently examining our thoughts, our beliefs and our behaviours, we can learn to make better choices about situations that impact us. When we discover that a thought is not entirely true, we can choose to refocus our attention, calm our instinctive fight and flight response and reduce our anxiety. An alternative approach would be to understand the new evidence and facts and proactively come up with a solution that can be more empowering and effective. If there is nothing that can be done to change a situation, we can work to accept this and let go of our attempts to control it. So let's discuss how we align our thoughts, beliefs and behaviours, because whilst understanding and acknowledging our thoughts is one tool to ease anxiety, we also need to be aware of our beliefs and our behaviours. It is often easier to recognise a behaviour or a physical sensation before we become consciously aware of our thoughts. Again, a question that you can often ask yourself is, what am I avoiding right now? It's a powerful question to ask, and it helps uncover some of the root causes of anxiety. So, for example, if we continue to avoid meetings and speaking up in front of others, the anxiety is very likely to still be there when we actually have to do this, regardless of how we think. This is because we have not trained our brain, we've not proved to ourselves that we are capable of doing the very things that we're trying to avoid. Therefore, we need to work towards overcoming our fears. We can do this using exposure therapy to confront the very thing that we're trying to avoid, the very thing that scares us. Now, this is done using small baby steps to ensure it's not too overwhelming and anxiety-inducing in that moment. You can find out more about the exposure therapy in the workbook over in the description. Now, a client of mine, we'll call him Bob, he continued to have many negative thoughts about speaking up in meetings or interviews. His current work contract was coming to an end, and he was worried that his fear and anxiety would prevent him from interviewing and getting a new job. As such, he was avoiding calls from all recruiters, and this was leaving him feeling guilty and ashamed that he'd not be able to support his family and pay the mortgage, and this would understandably, it was increasing his anxiety further. By the stage he came to me, he was avoiding friends, he was avoiding neighbours, and his confidence was at rock bottom. He had been in a meeting a few months earlier, and the CEO had turned up unexpectedly. Now, Bob was asked a question and he froze, he panicked. He was unable to speak up and he had to walk out of the meeting, shaking and sweating. He was absolutely mortified and he believed that he was no longer capable of doing his job. He believed that everyone in the office saw him as a failure. He then started to avoid attending meetings at all costs. He would procrastinate, and his fears prevented him from properly preparing for future meetings. So instead, his entire focus was on panicking and freezing again. Now, unsurprisingly, that is exactly what happened when he was forced to attend another meeting. The very thing he was trying to avoid and trying to prevent happened. Now, Bob predicted that everyone witnessed his voice shake and how he panicked, and he therefore thought that everybody else thought less of him. He believed his colleagues no longer felt that he was capable of doing his job. You can see how this is spiralling just from one thing about speaking up in meetings. He thought he was therefore going to lose his job as a result of how other people felt about him. He avoided conversations with anyone outside of his immediate family for fear of making a fool of himself. He was certain the same thing would happen again and again and again, and he couldn't help himself. He was unable to ever attend a meeting again as he was too anxious. That was his thoughts process. The next call he made was to me so that we could discuss working together. He had a large whiskey to help him, despite it being 9 o'clock in the morning. By the time he contacted me, the situation was dire. He needed to start interviewing again and he needed to do it quickly. And he had no option but to take action if he was going to be able to continue to pay his mortgage. Now, over a couple of sessions, we looked for evidence of what he was telling me and the language he was using. And I wanted to know if he had asked any of his colleagues about that specific day when the CEO had walked in. And he told me his trusted colleague hadn't noticed his voice break and assumed he had to leave the meeting abruptly because something came up. He was taken aback when his colleague told him that. So he didn't believe that my client would have been capable of panicking. Now, Bob only imagined and predicted what he thought others saw, heard and felt during that meeting. And he was too busy creating a worst case scenario instead of acknowledging what was real. I asked my client if anyone else had sought out his opinion since, and yes, of course they had. And then he justified it with a but, only because no one else knows the detail of the project like he does. So my client, although he's still the expert in the area and his colleagues are still valuing his opinion and what he has to say, he doesn't believe in himself. My client will constantly respond with yes, but, and come up with a justification in his own mind why it didn't actually count. He was disqualifying what they were saying. Now, despite his contract being scheduled to end in 2 weeks' time after the meeting with the CEO, he felt he had failed when the contract ended. The reality is that his contract was ending regardless. So how can he label himself a failure? But he did. Now, once he was able to see that his thoughts were not real, using one of the strategies that I teach, then we used the exposure ladder alongside some of the more intense techniques to help him build his self-belief back up and reverse the snowball effect of perceived fear and failure. So, to overcome this, we had to break the challenges he was facing into small, manageable steps. And over the next couple of months, he was able to prove to himself that he was capable. Now, it's important to congratulate yourself on each small step and to practice it multiple times until you feel truly, truly comfortable before you move on up the exposure ladder to the next step. So let's look at how does cognitive behaviour therapy work. It's a snowball effect, also known as fueling the fire, and it occurs when we have a negative thought which results in avoidant or protective behaviours. Over time, the thought gets bigger and bigger and more distorted until it becomes all-consuming. This is when our thoughts and beliefs can make our anxiety worse and even cause more problems. In my client's case, he stopped socialising with friends and neighbours that he'd known for years and years and years and he had previously enjoyed doing. And then he started to feel alone and isolated. It was a catch-22. Now, when we look at our thoughts realistically and can question our initial thoughts, we can start to see them for what they really are. They're just thoughts. When we are able to modify these negative thoughts, we stop them from triggering our anxiety and prevent them from avoiding things that are important to us. So let's take a little look at some types of negative thoughts, some negative cognitive distortions. It is helpful to be aware of some of the kinds of negative thoughts that people with anxiety experience. Cognitive distortions are thoughts that are heavily influenced by emotions, and they may not be consistent with the facts of a situation. As we are able to identify our distorted thoughts, we notice patterns in our thinking, and we are better able to catch ourselves when we notice an anxiety-inducing thought. So, number one, black and white thinking, or sometimes known as all or nothing thinking, is learning to see shades of grey is immensely useful, and we can appreciate that there is a middle ground. So this would be thoughts like, I always get anxious when I'm driving. Recognising that you only sometimes get anxious when driving can be a relief, as there are also times when I'm sure you drive and you don't feel anxious. Overgeneralisation. This is when we see a pattern based on a single event, or we are overly broad in the conclusions we draw, both of which can blind us to the reality of a situation. So an example of this would be, nothing good ever happens to me. Ask yourself, nothing? Really? And this will generally find evidence that this thought pattern is not valid. Mental filters. This is when we only pay attention to certain types of evidence and we don't register the bigger picture. We may choose to pick out the negative detail, dwell on it exclusively, and ignore any positives. An example would be thinking, the traffic jam ruined my entire day, even though you may also have enjoyed a phone call from a good friend and caught up with the kids over dinner. Disqualifying the positives. By discounting or rejecting the good things that happen to us, we can feel anxious even when we achieve something great. Now, we may believe something positive was pure luck alone and do not give ourselves the credit we deserve. An example of this would be one that my daughter did herself when she received an A star in maths. And she said, yeah, but it was a fluke, it doesn't count. Yes, it does still count. Jumping to conclusions, mind reading. When we believe we can guess what someone else is thinking or feeling, when they may not be thinking that at all. We've all done this. So an example would be when we feel hurt if someone ignores us or doesn't return a call straight away, when the reality is most likely that they just didn't see us, or they're tied up with something else, or they've got something else going on in their mind. So in that same present moment, it's most likely nothing to do with us. Fortune telling. This is when we think we can predict the future as a result of something that has happened in our past. So if we didn't get the last 3 jobs we applied for, we can start predicting that we won't get the next job we apply for either. And then we may give up trying. The reality is nobody gets accepted for every job. And eventually, if we keep putting ourselves out there, we will be successful. It has nothing to do with us. That's how it works. Magnification and minimalisation. This is when we magnify the importance of errors as evidence of the truth. So we've all done this as well. I took the wrong turn and it was an absolute disaster. Or we minimise a compliment we receive because we think it is undeserved, or the person paying that compliment didn't really mean it. We may tell ourselves they were just being nice. Notice that we don't normally apply the same logic if we receive what we perceive negative feedback. We don't think that they're just having a bad day. Labelling or mislabelling. We may label ourselves as terrible at something such as public speaking, based on an incident that happened many years ago, and we avoid speaking in front of an audience from there on. Or we may take one particular situation, such as burning the toast, and label ourselves based on that situation alone, saying harsh things like, I'm such an idiot. No, the reality is you just burnt the toast. That doesn't make you an idiot. Now, I personally believe this is one of the most damaging of all cognitive distortions. The majority of my clients come to me believing that they are an anxious person. No, they are someone who experiences anxiety sometimes alongside many other emotions. Now, when we label ourselves, our bodies constantly look for evidence that we are what we're looking for. So choose your label wisely. Catastrophizing. This is when we think of events as catastrophes instead of acknowledging the reality of the situation. So your boss asks you to come to her office. You then assume she is going to fire you. You then assume that your house is going to be repossessed because you can no longer pay the mortgage, and if your house is repossessed, your partner will leave and take the kids with you, and you'll spend the rest of your life alone. Now, I appreciate this is extreme, but this is a conversation that I actually had with a client. The reality was that his boss had a simple question about a report he had completed, and he was suddenly thinking he was going to be alone without his family. Should and must statements. Using critical words like should and must can put a lot of pressure on us and make us feel guilty, like we have already failed at something before we've even started it. Now, this is an example I caught myself saying a few years ago. I said, I should clean the car on Sunday. The reality was I had no desire to clean the car. I didn't want to. I wanted to spend the day with my daughter. So why did I wake up saying that I should be cleaning the car? It makes you feel so guilty. So accept it as it is. Accept it as it is. If you don't want to do it, then just call that out. So if you're finding this helpful, please like and subscribe to our channel and hit the notification button. Now let's look at beliefs around our own ability. So we think that we may lose control, not be able to cope, have a heart attack or pass out when anxiety symptoms get more extreme. This result is us being anxious about anxiety, and it can lead to increased panic attacks. We may believe we cannot tolerate discomfort, pain or negative events, and will question our ability to cope with future events because of the anxiety, believing if we can't tolerate this, what will happen if something really bad happens to us? This belief can evolve into general as well as health anxiety or even death anxiety, which I'm seeing more and more of recently. Now, while it is true that anxiety and worry are there to protect us, we may start believing if we don't worry about X, Y, Z, then ABC might actually happen. And this thinking results in obsessive compulsive disorders known as OCD. We may have negative thoughts and beliefs about ourselves and others and the world. Most of our beliefs are created before we become the age of 7. Now, these beliefs are most likely to have been handed down to us from our parents rather than created by us. I was led to believe that the world is a really dangerous place and terrible things can happen. These type of statements can make us feel more anxious, especially around other people, and can lead to social anxiety disorder. Yeah, terrible things can happen, and so can wonderful things too. Now, we all have some patterns of negative thinking depending on our experiences, but sometimes these patterns can get out of control. So self-awareness is key. Being aware of our thoughts is the first step in overcoming them. Once we are aware, we can start to question their validity. Now, let me know in the comments what one thought or cognitive distortion that you recognise and you keep repeating. Your story might just help somebody else feel less alone. You can use the Anxious Thoughts Diary to assist you by recording the initial thoughts as a statement, avoiding what ifs and questions. So if the thought is, what if I lose my job? It's more impactful to state, I will lose my job, as we can then address the likelihood of that happening. When we are feeling anxious, it's common to have a thought that leads to a more disturbing thought, which then leads to an even more disturbing thought, and so on. So make a note of the date and situation that is triggering you. How are you feeling right now, and what is the automatic thought? What evidence do you have to support or go against that thought? How can you revise that thought and that feeling? Now, if you do need further support to overcome your anxiety and the accompanying symptoms, a trained anxiety specialist can prescribe you a personalised plan to help you understand the underlying cause of your anxiety, as well as help develop healthy coping strategies that are focused around your individual needs. Taking care of your mental well-being is an essential part of your overall well-being, and left unresolved, anxiety can spiral out of control and have a significant impact on relationships, work, school and family life. So if you want to take back control and have a happier life where your fears no longer hold you back, book a free, no obligation consultation call. Let's talk about what's going on for you and how we can create a plan that feels safe, supported and effective. You'll find the link in the comments. It'll be pinned in the comments below. So if this video resonated with you, please do like, subscribe and share it with someone who might need it. Take care and bye for now. See you on the next video. Thank you.